shift for a police officer.
It started out as nothing.
It was innocuous. It was a little crime.
Can quickly take an extraordinary turn.
A simple traffic stop went stratospheric within 2 minutes.
Speed is 70 miles an hour.
He's outside the petrol station fighting with another male.
A routine case.
You can start off with something and it can turn into something completely different.
Taser! Taser! I'll hear from you!
Can suddenly spiral into a serious incident.
Then it switched. He locked the door. She knew that something was very, very wrong here.
Stand by, I think we're going to have a decamp. One got out with a baseball bat. There's a ton of cannabis in the car.
They were literally on a rampage.
Sometimes the most minor crimes.
I was looking for a stolen quad bike, found a lot more.
Can crack major cases.
We were now possibly looking at a serial killer.
Today on Big Little Crimes, a small internal investigation exposes corruption of 2 serving police community support officers.
We were looking at a concerted effort to ruin a man's life.
A few reports of dodgy ticket sales reveals a massive multi-million-pound criminal enterprise.
They were responsible for selling tens of thousands of tickets using hundreds of different identities.
But first, a common vehicle theft uncovers a family of fraudsters who'll stop at nothing to line their pockets. Detective Sergeant Andy Cullen knows in his job, no 2 days are ever the same.
I've always said, always expect the unexpected, and then it's not unexpected. I always looked at crime as a game. It is a game. It's them against us. Whichever way you look at it, the cops against the crims and vice versa. And it's the game that you got to play.
Little does Andy know, this next game is about to become the longest of his career. He's investigating a series of vehicle thefts that have taken place over the last few months.
I was tasked with looking at an organised crime group who were committing burglaries across South East Wales, particularly targeting addresses where they suspected high-value racing bikes. I'm talking anything up to £10,000–12,000 at that time.
But it isn't just bicycles the gang are targeting.
During the course of one of the burglaries they committed, a quad bike had been stolen.
Just after the latest theft, some fellow officers discovered a stolen vehicle at a car repair workshop. Andy wonders if the quad bike could be there too, so immediately heads to the premises.
It's quite an isolated location, out of the way.
I could see that this premises was quite a substantial workshop, maybe 10 or so cars in various bits within the workshop. At the rear then there was a compound that was just full of crashed, damaged, stripped and whole vehicles. And on the opposite side of the road was another compound which was also full of vans and cars.
But the quad bike isn't there. Over 100,000 vehicles are stolen in England and Wales every year, so unfortunately, it's unlikely it'll ever be found. But what Andy's about to learn turns the investigation into something much bigger.
One of the search officers came up and he said, "Have a look at this. What do you think of this?" It was a piece of paper. It was literally a scrap of paper. And written on it was what to say to the insurance company. And I literally went, time out, hold everything, get everybody together, I know what's going on here.
From the few words on the paper, Andy is certain the garage is committing insurance fraud. What started out as an investigation into stolen vehicles has turned into something much more serious.
I was looking for a quad bike, found a lot more.
Andy relies on his instincts, and they're rarely wrong, but is going to need proof that the garage are committing insurance fraud. The team meticulously searched the premises.
When we searched the compound, I think there was maybe 30, up to 40 vehicles, from complete vehicles to parts of vehicles in the compound, including parts from stolen vehicles. right from a tax disc of 1 through to the complete unit. Right behind me is a little bit of woodland. We also recovered number plates from stolen cars and other vehicles where they're just throwing bits and pieces into the undergrowth.
I'd always worked on my instincts. There's something all right with this place. It just wasn't adding up.
From the sheer number of stolen car parts he's found, Andy suspects that the insurance fraud is happening on a large scale. He thinks the family running the garage are stealing cars, smashing them up, and then claiming for accidents that never happened. It's a scam that could be making them a huge amount of money and pushing up all our premiums. He arrests the people from the garage and brings them in for questioning.
Right across the board, they said nothing. All the interviews were no comment. So we knew then, early doors, that we had to prove every single step of it.
But Andy's trusted his instincts so far, and he isn't about to waver.
I wasn't going to let it go. It's like a game of chess. What are they going to do next? How are we going to do it? It's that moving around, you know, who's going to make the next move?
Then Andy finally gets the breakthrough he desperately needs. At the garage, the team have discovered a potential gold mine of evidence.
They had installed their own CCTV on the workshop. They had a camera on the back and a camera roadside.
This could be a crucial find, but trawling through the footage isn't going to be an easy task.
He was on a 30-day loop. So we had 30 days of 24-hour CCTV to go through. That was one monstrous task for somebody. Yeah, I was the detective sergeant. Yes, I was the manager. But we had a small team. It was roll your sleeves up tight.
Later in the investigation, the true scale of the fraud is revealed.
Transpired at that time, it was probably the largest insurance fraud investigation of its type in the UK, all from one piece of paper.
In our next case today, a minor internal police investigation spirals into a scandal that brings shame on the force. The police are one of our most important institutions, tasked with keeping us safe. They make more than 500,000 arrests every year to ensure law and order is maintained. But when there's corruption on the inside, who can we turn to? For Sergeant Lee Westhead, working for the police is all about being thorough.
I do get bored quickly with normal life, but I'd happily spend hours pouring through 40,000 pages of phone data just to find that one piece of evidence.
And one case required every ounce of his investigative skill. Lee's specialist unit have received a seemingly routine call.
So the Greater Manchester Police Serious Collision Investigation Unit was designed to just be the force response to all fatal or life-changing injury road traffic collisions. But we also dealt with any serious breaches of police driver standards, and that was whether it was on or off duty. And it was that section of our work that this case fell into. I received a call from our professional standards branch, and they had a case to refer to me where a PCSO had been seen by another PCSO driving without a driving licence.
The police community support officer claims his colleague only has a provisional licence, so shouldn't be driving on his own. It sounds like a straightforward case for Lee.
It should be easy, really. A couple of witness statements, interview of the suspect, job sorted.
But it soon becomes clear that there could be more to this case than Lee first thought.
When I reviewed that statement, it was quite obvious that actually there wasn't just one witness. The male PCSO was in company with a female PCSO, and they worked together, and they both knew this colleague, and they had both identified him as driving at the time. So one of the first things I did was actually go out, find the female PCSO at work, and take a statement off her.
Lee's got both statements, but do they match?
You always expect some differences. It's just the way the human mind works. But in this case, there were some quite significant differences. One of the significant differences was where each witness said the vehicle was at the time they made the identification. And it was enough to make me want to look for some independent evidence.
He doesn't have far to go. The PCSO was allegedly spotted driving without a license outside a police station.
The evidence from the witness statements tells us that it is as they're leaving the police station and waiting for the gate to rise that they see the vehicle with their colleague driving it. As they leave the gate, they pass the Saxo to the right-hand side and they make the identification at that point.
Lee puts in a request for the CCTV from the station. But when the footage arrives, it appears to undermine both of the PCSO's accounts.
When we compare the CCTV cameras, we can see that when the PCSOs are here and make their identification, the Citroen Saxo is over here. The male PCSO puts the vehicle on this part of the road, which is actually here at the gate itself, and the female PCSO puts the vehicle on this part of the road, which is actually a part of the road that the vehicle never travels on.
Something isn't adding up, and Lee's suspicions soon grow even further.
It isn't just that, though. We then look at the line of sight involved, and it's impossible to see that vehicle. There's never an opportunity for them to misidentify their colleague. What exactly had happened that day, and why did their accounts differ so wildly from what we were seeing on the CCTV? We needed to find out what had happened.
Could what started as a minor tip-off actually be something completely different? Lee decides to speak to the officer accused of driving illegally to get his version of events.
He told me that he was not the driver and he had not driven that vehicle. And he was also able to tell me how he left the police station. When I then compared that with the CCTV, I was able to prove that his account was true and the account provided by the male and female PCSO was not true. They were not in a position to identify the car even, and certainly could never have identified him because he was never in it.
The police community support officer, who has been accused of driving without a license, doesn't even have a car and was seen walking home on the CCTV. In his whole career, Lee has never known anything like this.
I've had cases before where witnesses make an honest mistake. This could not have been an honest mistake. This was likely deliberate, which is incredibly worrying that two police community support officers would have given a signed witness statement with deliberate lies in it.
It's clear the two police community support officers are trying to frame their colleague, but Lee has no idea why. He immediately goes to arrest them for perverting the course of justice. And when Lee gets to the house of the first one in the early hours of the morning, he's in for a surprise.
Unusually, they were at the same address. These two PCSOs were not two independent witnesses that were just travelling home together. They were two people that were actually in a romantic relationship.
This changes everything. It looks like this couple are conspiring to frame their colleague for something he hasn't done. Lee takes a look around the house.
I also searched the address where the PCSOs were found, and from that address we seize numerous exhibits, including mobile phones.
The phones are sent away for analysis. In interview, they both stick to their original statements and are released under investigation. But soon, there's a breakthrough. Information from their phones is about to blow the investigation wide open.
There were a great deal of messages between the two PCSOs over a long period of time. And within those messages, we had discussion about the driving licence offence that we were investigating.
And that's not all. the small investigation is quickly spiralling.
We've now uncovered phone messages between the two that not only discuss the original offence of the licence and confirm some of our suspicions, but open up new lines of inquiry to potentially much bigger offending.
Later, Lee's investigation takes a sinister turn.
They then launched an attempt murder inquiry.
In our next case, a complaint about an overpriced concert ticket reveals a multi-million-pound fraudulent enterprise. Whether it's the bright lights of theatre, live music arena tours, or intimate gigs, people in the UK spend billions of pounds on tickets every year. And where there's demand, there are clever crooks waiting to rip people off.
We've all been through the struggle of trying to get a ticket at a fair price and then being left with, if you really want to go, an option, but to perhaps pay 10 times the face value. And it's because of people like this that consumers were being ripped off.
Trading Standards receive dozens of reports of ticket scams every week. But there was one case that landed on Mike Andrews' desk he'll never forget.
When this investigation first came to our attention, it was just another day in the office, if you like. At any time we're running a number of investigations. We were made aware, and there was a relatively small handful of complaints from consumers who felt that they'd been ripped off because they weren't able to buy tickets at a fair price or be able to get tickets at all. And they also found that they were buying tickets from secondary websites where they were then at risk of actually not being able to get into the event because the tickets were invalid. When we did an initial inspection, it looked like the tickets were being sold by many, many different individuals, but we felt that that wasn't necessarily the case.
Mike and the team suspect the complaints could all be related. They think a criminal team is behind the crafty scam and suspect they are buying a huge amount of tickets at retail value before selling them on at massively inflated prices, meaning there are fewer tickets for ordinary people to buy at face value. If this is the case, it's illegal. But how big is this suspected scam?
What we needed to establish from the outset was to get some idea of the scale of the issue, how many tickets were being sold, what events were they being sold for, how much were they being sold for, but of course ultimately who was behind it, who was responsible for selling those tickets.
After months of trawling through thousands of tickets on the websites, they make a breakthrough.
What ultimately lay behind it was one company that was operated by two individuals, but they were responsible for selling tens of thousands of tickets using hundreds of different identities.
Their suspicions have paid off. Not only are the criminals buying up large amounts of tickets and stopping ordinary people buying them at fair prices, they're also selling tickets they don't even own. This small case has grown from individual complaints of dodgy ticket sales to an industrial-scale fraud, involving tens of thousands of victims. Now the team have established it's one company. Their next task is to track down the scammers.
We're able to use the information we've gathered, IP addresses, financial details of where the tickets had been bought and sold from, that enabled us to identify not only the individuals concerned, but also where they lived, where the business was being operated from.
With names and an address in hand, Mike and the team waste no time. In the early morning, they raid the house connected to the business.
So where we are now is typical of the property that the criminals were using to run their enterprise, a nice, well-kept townhouse. From the outside, quite unsuspecting, but this is where we found their operation being run from an upstairs bedroom. That's where we recovered all of the computers and the phones, where we recovered hundreds and hundreds of printed tickets
and also the credit cards and the identities that they were using to perpetrate this massive fraud.
The two scammers are taken into custody, but don't give anything away. It's now the IT experts' grueling job to search through the computers, phones, and financial records to work out how they run their unscrupulous scam. And it turns out they're using the dark web, an encrypted part of the internet often used by criminals, so they're hard to trace.
And this is kind of the first stage in the process of how they acquired the tickets. And it's a system, as far as we were able to establish, that gave the touts advance notice of when tickets were going to become available for high-profile events.
They then use specialist software that they're using illegally to buy the tickets.
It allows you to have a series of tabs across the top so you can open up different web pages. What you're able to do is treat each of those tabs as a separate person, if you like. So when they hit the website just thought it was dozens and dozens of different people trying to buy those tickets. So it was all a very quick and automated process.
Then the scammers put these tickets on resale websites for an extortionate price.
But on the left-hand side here, you can see a snapshot of all of the different tickets that they've either uploaded or are due to upload, tickets that they've been paid for, and sales that are complete. And the numbers there give you a bit of an idea of the sheer scale of the operation that they were running. And this was just the tickets that were uploaded to one particular platform.
It's a ruthless scam. And it's becoming clear that the volume of tickets being sold illegally is enormous.
This was the first time we'd come across a system as advanced as this, a system that would automate a process at such scale and speed and achieve such a high degree of success.
The scammers are running a multi-million-pound operation, and innocent music fans are paying the price.
That process took around about 6 to 9 months to fully understand it.
And it wasn't just the technology Mike and his team had to get their heads around. In the raid, they found multiple credit cards in different names. But who are the people linked to the cards? Is this operation even bigger than they think?
As a consumer, you'll see that usually the ticketing site restricts your ability to buy maybe only 4 or 6 tickets. But in order to get around that, the criminals in this case were recruiting friends, families, and in some cases actually just creating completely fake identities so that they could use all of those credentials and the cards linked to them.
The scale of the crime is growing. The Trading Standards team estimate the scammers have swindled £10 million from innocent victims in just 2.5 years, profiting a huge £3.5 million. It's taken 3 years of meticulous investigation, but finally, Mike and his team watched the two scammers go to trial.
This was a true landmark case. It was the first time that a company had been prosecuted for buying huge quantities of tickets and reselling them at vast profits.
This was a savvy scam, but in the end, it wasn't smart enough to outwit Mike and his team. Both scammers are found guilty of a number of fraud offences.
The first defendant received 4 years imprisonment and the second defendant received 2.5 years imprisonment.
What started as a minor complaint of buying overpriced tickets has led to the takedown of a major multi-million-pound online scam.
There was certainly a sense of relief. It was years of overcoming challenges and, at various points in the investigation, elements of uncertainty as to whether or not we would actually be successful, but we kept going and ultimately the jury found them guilty, which was a fantastic achievement.
We're heading back to South Wales now. where a report of a stolen vehicle has spiraled into a large-scale insurance fraud investigation. Detective Sergeant Andy Cullen and his team are working around the clock, trawling through hours of CCTV from the suspicious family-run car garage. Will it offer the proof they need to show the suspects are damaging cars themselves before claiming money through unsuspecting insurance companies?
Quality of the CCTV is very good. It wasn't too grainy. We were able to identify vehicles quite clearly. We were able to identify people quite clearly.
And one piece of footage in particular makes for startling viewing. Several employees are gathered around vehicles in the workshop yard.
You've got the forklift truck being driven out and positioned in the rear yard. Land Rover Discovery's parked out the back here, and they're bringing it in. And they're just lining it all up. You can see that there's so much damage being done to the front of the vehicle there, but they spend a little bit of time now trying to increase the damage. They've launched the Land Rover into the forklift truck for the second time, and they're just reversing back for the third and final time, and this one actually activates the hazard warning lights on the Land Rover and shifts the forklift truck considerably further than the previous two collisions had. And we've just got them having a little look now at how good their work has been for the last 10 minutes. Clearly they weren't satisfied with the visual damage that had been done to the vehicle, so they have a go at it. Let's give it a kick. And have a go with what appears to be a crowbar of some sort. We pulled the headlamp unit out. They then did a manual activation of the airbags by pulling them out of the dashboard to make it look as if the vehicle had been in a serious collision. They'd activated the airbags.
Andy knew from the second he was handed the scrap of paper at the garage with the words, "What to say to the insurance company," that this was an insurance fraud. And now he's got the proof.
Their modus operandi was to damage vehicles or have a damaged vehicle and then say he's been in a collision. It's that simple.
It's an enormous breakthrough. The family are receiving insurance money for accidents that have simply never happened. But he needs to know how widespread this is. Just how many people are involved in the scam? He contacts accident management companies around the country. They act as the middlemen between the insurance providers and the person claiming, in this case, the garage.
We went to those companies and seized all the documentary evidence that we could from them in respect of all of the claims that they had processed. We then had to also visit and obtain statements and further evidence from virtually every insurance company in the country to back up the claims that had gone from the accident management companies to the insurance companies. We had hundreds of thousands of pages of documentary evidence.
71 claims have been processed that are linked to the workshop, for damage to vehicles as well as personal injury to the drivers. Andy knows they're fraudulent, but he needs to be able to prove it in court. Before the insurance companies paid out, they came round to look at the damage to the cars. Could this help Andy's investigation?
The insurance companies had taken photographs of vehicles when they were assessed, and then through mathematics and physics, showing that, no, that damage could not have happened in that way.
Despite the insurance companies unsuspectingly paying out on them months earlier, experts are now saying the damage could not have been caused by the accidents the garage claimed had happened. Added to the CCTV, this proves that there is widespread fraud taking place at the garage, but Andy needs to be able to individually link his suspects to the scam. Andy turns his attention to their social media accounts.
From an investigation point of view, social media is an absolute goldmine. Always has been and it always will be, because people will always tell you their entire lives on a social media account.
The family members had claimed to be involved in accidents and received thousands of pounds in personal injury payouts.
But none of these collisions appeared on social media, which was a significant point for us. An awful lot of the people involved had active social media and were posting their daily lives, but then there would be a claim for a crash where the BMW's been smashed up and there's not a word of it on social media. But at the same time, they're telling you what they're having for their breakfast, dinner, tea and supper.
Andy digs deeper into one person he suspects of making fraudulent claims, and the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle start to fall into place.
And then there's another photograph in front of the pyramids in Egypt. They were using the money from the claims to finance their lifestyles with holidays. It just happened that the cost of that holiday was pretty much the same as a claim that they put in not long before it.
The team have found evidence of nearly 200 claims they think are fraudulent, and the huge scale of the crime is quickly becoming apparent.
We could see that it started off with the people running the garage themselves, and then building it out, and roping in friends and family and colleagues and friends of friends. And a lot of people ultimately got dragged into it just through greed.
Andy and his team's tenacity has paid off. They know that 158 people have made fraudulent claims in the last 2 years, getting thousands of pounds in payouts for accidents that never happened.
These people were trying to make out they'd been seriously injured, and they weren't. That's very, very frustrating. It takes away from the people who have been genuinely injured through no fault of their own, or through a genuine accident, and have their whole lives changed because of it. On top of that, you've got these people who are making claims for false collisions that never happened. That has a massive financial impact, and that has a massive impact on everybody in society who is trying to lead a normal, law-abiding life. Across the 2 years, we could show in the region of £2 million loss to the insurance industry. And these people, they were clever in that they kept themselves under the radar. They were not so clever in that they were recording themselves doing it. And they didn't bank on me walking in there and saying, I know what that piece of paper means.
All of the 158 people, including 5 members of the same family, are taken to court and sentenced to over 60 years combined for their roles in the large-scale fraud. What began as a straightforward investigation into stolen vehicles has spiraled to uncover a massive crime.
Transpired at that time, it was probably the largest insurance frauds investigation of its type in the UK, all from one piece of paper.
For Andy, it shows insurance fraud is anything but a victimless crime.
I pay for my car insurance, my house insurance, and every other form of insurance. The criminal activities had a direct impact on everybody. It was totally unbelievable, totally excessive, and greed was the root cause of it all.
It's time to wrap up our final case over in Manchester, where a suspected motoring offence has exposed corruption of 2 serving officers. Sergeant Lee Westhead and his team are working every hour under the sun to try to unpick a web of deceit and lies. 2 serving police community support officers have made false allegations against their colleague, who is also a PCSO. The unscrupulous pair have been arrested and their mobiles seized. And the phone evidence reveals there's more to this than meets the eye.
The messages were important because they established that the two PCSOs were in a relationship, and that is important when we're considering their evidence that up until that point we'd assumed was independent evidence.
And the messages between the lovers throw up more worrying evidence. It looks like the pair are also making allegations about someone else.
We recover an image from the phone of the male PCSO sent to the female PCSO, showing a picture of a letter from the driver and vehicle licensing agency. And that relates to a report that's been made by the male PCSO reporting another male for medical reasons to the DVLA, saying that they're not fit to drive. So when we reviewed the image of the DVLA letter, we were surprised to see that the person concerned in that letter was actually the ex-partner of the female PCSO, the person that the male PCSO was now in the relationship with. So he had reported her ex-partner to the DVLA.
The new couple are trying to get the woman's ex-boyfriend's driving license taken off him for medical reasons that simply aren't true. And it doesn't stop there. Lee makes another very concerning discovery.
The male PCSO's phone had been in regular contact with the charity Crime Stoppers. And that was really interesting because there are established procedures in place. Police staff do not need to contact Crime Stoppers. They can submit intelligence.
This is very worrying. A serving officer should know they can go direct to their manager to report a crime. Lee needs to know why the male PCSO contacted Crime Stoppers.
So we looked at all the intelligence information that had been sent to GMP within a certain time period and then sought to cross-reference that information with anyone that we thought connected to either of these two PCSOs. This led us to uncover a particular intelligence report that had been submitted, and that related to a hit-and-run collision where an on-duty female PCSO had been struck by a vehicle and the vehicle had failed to stop.
The contact with Crime Stoppers said a deliberate attempt had been made on a police community support officer's life. The male PCSO who makes the call claims that the officer who had been hit had not been the intended target. He says the person responsible is the ex-partner of his girlfriend and that she was the intended victim.
This massive case of mistaken identity had allegedly taken place, which had left an innocent member of staff in hospital. The real target was the female PCSO, now in danger of her life.
Because the hit and run itself was genuine, police have to assume the information supplied to Crime Stoppers is too.
Clearly, the officers took that incredibly seriously. previously. They'd been out, warned the female PCSO that her life was at risk, and they then launched an attempt murder inquiry, which saw them obtain a warrant and attend at the ex-partner's address with a view to arresting him.
The case is rapidly turning into something much more serious. What began as a small internal investigation has become an attempted murder case.
These two parallel investigations that up until this point didn't know each other existed, we were able then to link the two together.
Lee brings the female PCSO's ex-boyfriend, who has now been accused of attempted murder, in for interview.
He denied any involvement. He provided his location, his alibi at the time.
His alibi checks out. The man couldn't have committed the hit and run.
And at that point, the suspect in the attempted murder became my victim.
The two PCSOs have falsely accused two different people of crimes they haven't committed. First, the PCSO they accused of driving without a license, and now the female officer's ex-boyfriend who they've accused of attempted murder. It's a complex investigation. Lee needs to gather enough evidence to charge the unscrupulous pair. He looks into their computer records when they were on shift.
There were also additional offences under the Computer Misuse Act that related solely to the male PCSO and his access to GMP computer systems. We can see that the male PCSO has been accessing intelligence records on the ex-partner. We can see that they've been submitting intelligence reports on the ex-partner.
The number of offences is growing by the minute. It's clear there is a concerted effort to frame their colleague and the woman's ex-boyfriend for offences they have never committed. Lee gathers all of the phone data.
Pulling this all together and always sitting in the background like a running commentary are the text messages from those phones. Messages are exchanged. The DVLA is discussed. The licence allegation outside the police station is discussed. And importantly, the hit and run is discussed. We can see a pattern. And that pattern is that not only are they trying to fool the police and Crime Stoppers, but they're trying to fool their family and friends. They're building this fiction, and that, for me, sealed what we were looking at. We were looking at a concerted effort to ruin a man's life.
Lee's got everything he needs. He brings the two police community support officers back in to be interviewed again.
The charges were misconduct in a public office, and that related to contacting the DVLA, and perverting the course of justice, and that related to framing, for want of a better word, the female PCSO's ex-partner for an attempted murder.
And during the interviews, they were challenged with all the evidence that we'd gathered.
The lovers stick to their original story and deny everything. But as Lee arrives at court, there is one final twist to this worrying tale.
On the first day of the trial at Crown Court, both PCSOs changed their pleas to guilty.
The male PCSO was sentenced to 19 months imprisonment. The female PCSO, she was sentenced to 16 months imprisonment in a Young Offenders Institute. They were then dismissed from Greater Manchester Police and will never return.
What started as a minor internal complaint has led to the unravelling of an extraordinary scheme of deception and has exposed corruption of two serving officers. Thanks to Lee's tenacity, the PCSO accused of driving without a licence was cleared and is back at work. And he knows he got the right result for the second victim too.
One of the things that I take away from this case is that I met that victim and he was utterly satisfied that we had done exactly what any member of the public would expect the police to do in those circumstances. We'd found the answers, we'd put the people in front of the court and they'd face justice. And I think that can only be marked as a success.
Join us again on Big Little Crimes, when everyday policing...
I noticed that it was a left-hand drive car and it just stood out as being wrong.
uncovers extraordinary crimes.
As soon as she got an opportunity, she jumped out of the car and she was away on her toes.
And cracks major cases.
When we work together, we can take out serious criminality.
From the 9-1, switch that over, that's the young blonde. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Shawty wanna